The air in the private airport terminal crackled with tension. A lanky teenage boy stood frozen near the boarding gate, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Two security officers loomed over him, their voices sharp as they demanded he leave the premises. "This area's for authorized personnel only, kid," one barked, jabbing a finger toward the exit. The boy, dressed in a crisp navy blazer and jeans, straightened his posture. "I am authorized," he said calmly, though his cheeks flushed pink. "My name is Barron Trump." The officers exchanged smirks. "Right, and I'm the president," the taller one scoffed, triggering nervous laughter from a small crowd gathering nearby. The boy's composure wavered. "Check the manifest," he insisted, his voice rising slightly. But the staff had already made up their minds. One officer grabbed his shoulder, steering him forcefully toward the doors. The boy jerked free, his eyes blazing. "Don't touch me," he snapped, a rare crack in his usually quiet demeanor. A middle-aged woman in the crowd pulled out her phone, recording the confrontation. "You're making a mistake," the boy said, quieter now, his voice trembling. The officers didn't relent. "Move along, Prince," the second officer sneered, shoving him through the sliding glass doors and into the blustery afternoon. The terminal doors hissed shut behind him, locking him out. The boy, Barron Trump, stood alone on the curb, his breath visible in the cold air. He glanced at his watch, then at the security cameras overhead, his jaw tightening. A passing traveler paused, squinting at him. "Hey, aren't you?" Barron turned away, shoulders hunched, and pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over his mother's contact. But before he could dial, the bystander's video exploded online. By the time Melania Trump's sleek black SUV pulled onto the airport's service road 20 minutes later, the clip had already racked up 500,000 views. The caption read, "Rich kid tries to flex, gets humiliated by airport staff." But the real humiliation was just beginning. The video spread like wildfire. Within minutes, it dominated social media, Twitter threads exploded, TikTok edits mocked the confrontation, and news outlets scrambled to verify the boy's identity. Comment sections became battlegrounds. "Typical rich kid throwing a tantrum," one user wrote. "Since when do airport cops play judge and jury?" fired back another. The world seemed divided, half reveling in the schadenfreude of a privileged teen's downfall, half outraged at the heavy-handedness of the staff. Meanwhile, miles away, Melania Trump sat in the back of a chauffeured car, her attention fixed on the muted television screen in front of her. A charity luncheon had ended early, a scheduling error, her assistant claimed, but the First Lady's instincts prickled. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her purse, but she ignored it. A habit honed by years of public scrutiny. It wasn't until her head of security, riding shotgun, turned to face her with a grim expression that she felt the first flicker of dread. "Ma'am," he said quietly, passing her a tablet. The video played on loop. Her son's face, pale and defiant, filled the screen. The audio was off, but she didn't need sound to recognize the tension in his stance, the slight tremble in his hands, the way he lifted his chin, a mirror of his father's stubbornness. Her stomach dropped. "Turn the car around," she said, her voice steady but edged with steel. The driver hesitated, glancing at the security chief. "The airport," she clarified, sharper now. "Now." As the SUV veered onto an exit ramp, her security team sprang into action. Phones rang, voices overlapped, lock down the terminal, get legal on the line, suppress that footage before. Melania tuned them out. She stared out the window, her reflection ghostly against the gray sky. Memories flickered, Barron as a toddler, hiding behind her legs at public events, Barron at 13, begging to skip a state dinner because they all just stare at me. Her nails dug into her palms. At the airport, chaos reigned. Reporters, tipped off by the viral clip, swarmed the arrivals lane. Camera flashes lit up the dusk like lightning. Melania's security team muscled through the crowd, forming a tight shield around her. She walked briskly, sunglasses hiding her eyes, her expression unreadable. Inside the terminal, whispers trailed her like a wake. "That's her, did you see the video?" This is about to get ugly. The terminal manager, a harried man in a too-tight suit, met her at the security office. Mrs. Trump, he began, sweating visibly, let me assure you, this is all a terrible misunderstanding. Where is my son? She interrupted, her accent thicker with emotion. He left the premises, ma'am. We offered to rebook him, but he refused to, his voice faltered under her gaze. Show me the footage, she said. All of it. The manager paled. That's not standard protocol. Privacy concerns, you understand. Melania removed her sunglasses. Do I look like I care about protocol? The room fell silent. Reluctantly, the manager pulled up the security tapes. The grainy footage showed Barron entering the terminal alone, handing his passport to a check-in agent. The agent frowned, typed something, then waved over security. The confrontation unfolded exactly as the viral clip had shown, except here, the audio revealed the officer's taunts. Think you're special, kid? Save the act for someone who's buying it. Melania's breath hitched when she saw the guard shove Barron. Her son stumbled, caught himself, then turned back with a look of pure fury, a look she'd never seen on him before. Outside the office, airport staff exchanged nervous glances. A young baggage handler, eavesdropping, pulled out his phone and texted a friend. Boss messed with the wrong family. This'll be on CNN by morning. He wasn't wrong, the security office felt claustrophobic, the hum of computer fans the only sound as Melania Trump leaned closer to the monitor. Her eyes never left the screen, even as the terminal manager shifted uncomfortably beside her. The footage played on, revealing the full scope of the confrontation, Barron's quiet insistence, the guard's escalating mockery, the shove that sent him stumbling. When the video ended, she straightened slowly, her face a mask of calm. But her knuckles, gripping the edge of the desk, were white. Who authorized this? She asked, her voice dangerously soft. The manager swallowed. Ma'am, our staff is trained to handle unauthorized access. Your son didn't have the proper what? Melania turned to him, her tone slicing through the room. His name was on the manifest. His credentials were verified at check-in. Or do you routinely eject passengers after clearing them? The manager opened his mouth, then closed it. Behind him, a junior staff member, the check-in agent who'd first flagged Barron, flinched. Melania's gaze snapped to her. You, she said. Explain. The agent hesitated, her eyes darting to her boss. I thought the reservation was a prank. We get fake celebrity bookings sometimes, and the system didn't flag it as VIP, her voice trailed off. Melania's sharp laugh cut the air. A prank, she repeated. So instead of confirming, you called security. To remove a minor. Alone. The agent stared at the floor. The manager stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. Mrs. Trump, let's discuss this privately. We'll compensate your son for the inconvenience, of course. Compensate? Melania's composure frayed, her accent sharpening. You think this is about money? Look at him. She jabbed a finger at the frozen image of Barron on the screen, his face a mix of anger and humiliation. You think you will forget this? That I will forget? A tense silence followed. Somewhere in the terminal, a PA system announced a delayed flight. Melania turned to her security chief, who'd been hovering near the door. Find my son. Now. As the chief barked orders into his earpiece, Melania addressed the room. I want the names of everyone involved. Every officer, every agent. And the contact information for your corporate oversight. The manager's face drained of color. That's not necessary. We can handle this internally. You've handled enough, she said coldly. Outside the office, word of Melania's presence spread. Passengers craned their necks, phones raised. Airport employees whispered in clusters, some nervous, others defensive. He should have shown ID, a baggage handler muttered. Kid acted like he owned the place. But in a break room, one of the security officers from the video, the taller one who'd mocked Barron, paced like a caged animal. His partner sat slumped at a table, head in his hands. "They'll fire us over this," the seated man mumbled. "I've got a mortgage. My kid's in college." "Shut up," the taller officer snapped. "We followed protocol. Rich brat didn't cooperate. End of story." But his bravado faltered when his phone buzzed with a notification. A news alert: First Lady confronts airport staff over son's removal. Meanwhile, Barron sat in a cramped airport cafe 3 terminals away, his hood pulled low over his face. He'd bought a burnt coffee just to hide in the corner. His phone lit up with messages, friends sending the viral video, some with laughing emojis, others asking WTF happened? He ignored them all. When a shadow fell over his table, he tensed. But it was just an elderly man in a pilot's uniform. "Rough day, son?" the man asked, nodding at Barron's death grip on his coffee cup. Barron shrugged. The pilot hesitated, then slid into the seat opposite him. "Saw the commotion earlier. You're the Trump kid, aren't you?" Barron stiffened, ready to bolt. But the pilot's voice was gentle. "I flew your family once. Few years back. You were quieter then." "Still am," Barron muttered. The pilot smiled faintly. "People forget kids grow up. Especially famous ones." He studied Barron's face. "You okay?" Barron looked away. "Peachy." Before the pilot could respond, 2 men in dark suits appeared at the table. "Barron," one said, "your mother's waiting." The pilot raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as Barron stood, shoulders slumping in resignation. "Thanks," Barron mumbled to the pilot. "Anytime," the man replied. "Safe travels." As Barron followed the agents out, the pilot watched him go, then pulled out his phone. He typed a quick post to a private aviation forum: "Just met the Trump kid. Polite. Didn't deserve the circus they're making of him." The post got 3 likes. But across the airport, the circus was just getting started. Melania stood near a private lounge entrance, her posture rigid, as Barron approached flanked by security. For a moment, the mother and son simply stared at each other, Melania's face a blend of fury and relief, Barron's a storm of embarrassment and defiance. Without a word, she pulled him into a tight embrace. He stiffened, then sagged against her, his face buried in her shoulder. "Why didn't you call me?" she whispered. Barron stepped back, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Didn't want to make it worse," he muttered, avoiding her eyes. Melania cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. "You are never a burden. Understand?" He nodded, though his jaw stayed clenched. Around them, airport staff lurked like ghosts, pretending not to watch. Melania's security chief cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we should leave. The press has the main exits covered, but we can use the tarmac." As they moved toward a service elevator, Barron's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, another meme comparing him to a kicked puppy, and shoved it back into his pocket. Melania noticed, but said nothing. Years in the public I had taught her that some wounds needed air, not bandages. Later, in the quiet of her SUV, Barron stared out the tinted window. The city lights blurred as memories surfaced, unwanted, but relentless. 2 years earlier, a school football game. Barron, then 14, scored a touchdown. Cheers erupted, until a parent yelled, "Nice hands, Donnie Jr." The crowd laughed. His teammates avoided his eyes. He quit the team the next week. Last summer, a family dinner at a restaurant. Strangers snapped photos through the window. His father joked, "Smile, Barron, you're on the menu." His mother's grip tightened on her fork. Last month, a college tour. The guide recognized him, smirked, and announced, "We don't accept legacy donations here." Barron left before the tour ended. The memory stung. He'd learned to stay quiet, stay small. But today, he hadn't. And look what happened. Back at the airport, the terminal manager's office buzzed with panic. Corporate lawyers had arrived, their briefcases snapping open like traps. Employee files littered the desk. "This one," a lawyer said, tapping a photo of the taller security officer. "Multiple complaints about aggression. A liability." The manager mopped his brow. "He's ex-military. Good record until. Irrelevant. Terminate him." The check-in agent too, she failed to verify credentials. "And the other guard?" the manager asked. The lawyer paused, scanning another file. "Single father. Clean record. Let him sweat, then reassign him." The other guard, a wiry man in his late 30s, sat on his apartment's fire escape, staring at his phone. His daughter's birthday wish blinked on the screen. "Daddy, did you get my cake?" He hadn't. The airport fiasco had cost him his shift, and his pay. Inside, his 7-year-old danced in a too small princess dress from last year, blissfully unaware. His phone rang. An unknown number. He answered warily. "Mr. Rivera?" A woman's voice, crisp and formal. "This is the First Lady's office. We're aware of your role in today's incident. Would you be willing to discuss it?" His throat went dry. "Am I fired?" "Not yet." The next morning, Barron sat at the kitchen table of the Trump residence, picking at toast. Melania slid a newspaper toward him. The headline blared, "Trump teen targeted in airport ambush." "They're making it sound like a kidnapping," Barron muttered. "It sells papers," Melania said. "But this," she tapped her phone, where a private email glowed, "is different." The email was from Hector Rivera, the security guard. Barron scanned it, brow furrowed. "Dear Mr. Trump. I was one of the officers who removed you. I didn't know who you were. That's no excuse. I have a daughter your age. If someone treated her like that, I'd want to tear the world apart. I'm sorry. Hector." Barron pushed the phone away. "What's he want? A pardon?" Melania studied him. "He wants nothing. Only to apologize." So, she said gently, "people rarely admit they're wrong. Especially to us." Barron stood abruptly, chair scraping. "I'm going for a walk." Hector Rivera, meanwhile, paced his kitchen. His daughter's half-eaten birthday cake sat on the counter. She'd blown out the candles, grinning, while he'd fought to keep his hands from shaking. His phone buzzed. The First Lady's office again. "Mr. Rivera," the same woman said, "Barron would like to meet you." The room tilted. "Why?" "To talk. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., at our office." Neutral ground. Hector glanced at his daughter, now asleep on the couch, frosting smeared on her cheek. I'll be there." He hung up, sank into a chair, and put his head in his hands. Barron paced his bedroom, the apology email burning a hole in his mind. Outside, the morning sun glared through the windows, but he kept the curtains drawn. He'd read Hector's words a dozen times. "If someone treated her like that, I'd want to tear the world apart." The line stuck in his throat. Part of him wanted to scream, "Then why didn't you think?" Another part, smaller, quieter, wondered what Hector's daughter looked like. Did she know her father was drowning in regret? A knock interrupted his brooding. Melania entered, holding a tray of tea. Her presence was steady, unflinching, the way it always was during storms. "They're ready for you downstairs," she said, setting the tray on his desk. Barron didn't turn around. "What if I don't want to go?" "Then don't." He spun to face her, surprised. Melania shrugged. "It's your choice." "But choices made in anger," she said, nodding at the crumpled printout of the email on his bed, "rarely bring peace." He scowled. "Since when do we forgive people who humiliate us?" "Since we realize humiliation eats the container it's stored in," she replied simply. "Your father never learned that. Don't repeat his mistakes." The words hung between them, sharp and true. Barron stared at his shoes. Hector arrived early, his dress shirt starched stiff, his daughter's good luck bracelet hidden under his sleeve. The Trump office loomed over Manhattan, all glass and cold light. A secretary led him to a conference room where Barron already sat, slouched in a chair, eyes fixed on his phone. For a long moment, neither spoke. Hector cleared his throat. "Thank you for agreeing to this." Barron didn't look up. "My mom's idea." Still. Silence. Hector's palms sweat. He'd rehearsed this, apologies, explanations, but now, under the boy's icy glare, his words deserted him. Instead, he blurted, "I served in Afghanistan." Barron's eyes flicked upward. "For tours," Hector continued, voice rough. "Came home with a bad leg and a habit of seeing threats everywhere. Airport job, it let me stay alert. Protect people. Or so I thought." He paused. "That day, when you said your name, I thought it was a joke. Kids prank us all the time, fake IDs, pretending to be influencers. But that's no excuse. I didn't protect anyone. I failed." Barron set his phone down. "You called me a liar." "I did. And shoved me." Hector nodded, throat tight. "I've replayed that moment 1,000 times. My daughter," he pulled out his wallet, slid a school photo across the table. A gap-toothed girl grinned back, wearing unicorn pajamas. "She's 7. If some guard treated her like that," he trailed off. Barron glanced at the photo. "What's her name?" "Sophia." Another silence, softer now. Melania watched from a monitor in the next room, her security chief beside her. "You think this is wise, ma'am? The media's already calling it a publicity stunt." "Let them," Melania said, eyes on the screen. Barron was leaning forward now, asking quiet questions. Hector's shoulders had lost their rigidity. "And if he asks for leniency? For the guard to keep his job?" "Then," Melania said, "we'll consider it." Back in the conference room, Barron surprised himself. The anger was still there, a hot coal in his chest, but beneath it flickered curiosity. "Why'd you even take this job?" "After the military, I mean." Hector hesitated. "Stability. Sophia's mom left when she was 2. I needed health insurance, weekends off. But the pay's tight." He rubbed his neck. "Last month, her school said she needed tutoring. I couldn't afford it. Guess I took that shame out on you." Barron winced. He thought of his own privileges, private tutors, security details, a last name that opened doors even as it painted targets on his back. For the first time, he saw Hector not as a villain, but as a man fraying at the edges. "They're gonna fire you, aren't they?" Barron said. Hector's smile was bitter. "Wouldn't blame them." Barron stood abruptly, chair scraping. Hector flinched, expecting a shout. Instead, the boy walked to the window, staring down at the ant-like traffic below. "I used to think everyone hated me because of my dad," he said quietly. "Turns out, some people just hate their own lives." Hector's breath caught. Barron turned. "I'm not gonna ask them to spare your job." Hector nodded, defeated. "But," Barron added, "I won't ask them to fire you either." Later, as Hector rode the elevator down, he replayed the words. "Not gonna ask them to fire you either." It wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't vengeance. In the lobby, his phone buzzed, a voicemail from the airport. "Mr. Rivera, report to HR tomorrow. A decision has been made." He closed his eyes, bracing for the blow. Hector stood outside the HR office the next morning, his daughter's bracelet digging into his wrist like a shackle. The hallway smelled of industrial cleaner and dread. When the door finally opened, a stern woman with a clipboard waved him in. "Mr. Rivera," she began, not looking up, "your actions violated multiple protocols." However, she paused, flipping a page. "Given the First Lady's recommendations, we're suspending you for 2 weeks without pay. You'll also attend sensitivity training." Hector blinked. "Suspension?" Not termination? The woman peered over her glasses. Consider this a warning. The Trumps declined to press charges, but the court of public opinion isn't as forgiving. She slid a form across the desk. Sign here. His hand shook as he scribbled his name. 2 weeks without pay. Sophia's tutoring fees, the rent, it might as well have been a death sentence. But it was a chance. Across town, Barron stared at his laptop, scrolling through news articles. Headlines screamed, Trump teen spares guard, woke gesture or PR stunt. Comments ranged from praise to venom. One stuck in his craw, rich kid plays hero after throwing a tantrum. How noble. He slammed the laptop shut. Melania, sipping tea nearby, raised an eyebrow. You expected roses? I expected something, he muttered. Not this. The world loves a villain more than a repentant man, she said. But you did the right thing. That's all that matters. Barron snorted. Doesn't feel like enough. Melania set her cup down. Then make it enough. The next day, Barron surprised everyone. He called his mother's PR team. I want to make a statement. My way. They pushed back, let us draft something professional, but he insisted. That evening, he filmed a shaky selfie video in his bedroom, hoodie pulled low. Look, he began, awkwardly addressing the camera, I'm not here to blame anyone. What happened sucked. But the guy who apologized, he's got a kid. A life. I'm not asking you to forgive him. Just, maybe don't destroy him? He hesitated, then added, and lay off the memes. They're kinda lame. He posted it raw, no edits. Within minutes, #Don'tDestroyHector trended. Support poured in from unexpected corners, veterans groups, single parents, even a few celebrities. But the trolls doubled down, boo-hoo, trust fund baby cries for his servant. Hector, meanwhile, faced his own trial by fire. At the grocery store, a cashier recognized him. Ain't you that airport guy, she sneered, bagging his rice and beans extra slow. Bet Trump paid you off. He said nothing, heat climbing his neck. Outside, a teen snapped his photo, yelling, Yo, it's the Trump bully. Hector fled, Sophia's birthday cake ingredients forgotten on the counter. That night, as Sophia slept, he scrolled job listings, desperation tightening his chest. Then an email popped up, subject line, from Barron Trump. Hector. Saw the stuff online. Don't let the losers get to you. My dad says they're just jealous. I think they're bored. Anyway, Sophia's tutoring. I know a guy. Let me know. B. Hector stared at the screen. A contact number followed. His first thought, trap? His second, why would a billionaire's son bother? But Sophia's math homework lay on the table, half finished and smudged with tears. He called the number. Hector stared at the phone in his hand, the dial tone buzzing like a trapped fly. What am I doing? He thought. Barron's offer felt like a trapdoor, step through it, and there'd be no climbing back. But then he glanced at Sophia, bent over her homework at the kitchen table, erasing so hard her paper tore. Daddy, I don't get it, she mumbled, tears pooling in her eyes. Hector took a breath. Someone's gonna help, okay? A friend. The word tasted strange. 2 days later, a knock came at Hector's apartment door. He half expected cameras, a swarm of reporters. Instead, he found a college-aged woman in a Georgetown sweatshirt, holding a binder of math worksheets. Mr. Rivera? I'm Leah. Barron's, guy sent me. Sophia peeked around Hector's leg. Are you a princess? Leah laughed. Nope. Just a nerd who loves fractions. Want to learn how to slice pizza into 8 equal pieces? Sophia's eyes lit up. Hector hesitated, but Leah flashed an ID. I'm background checked, promise. Barron paid up front. No strings. Paid up front. Hector's pride prickled, but Sophia was already dragging Leah to the table. Meanwhile, Barron's video continued to ricochet across the internet. Late-night hosts mocked his delivery, kinda lame? The most relatable thing a Trump's ever said. But parents' forums buzzed differently. Kid showed more guts than most politicians, one comment read. Wish my son stood up for others like that. Melania monitored it all from her office, a half-smile playing on her lips. Her assistant frowned at the screen. The Post is calling it damage control. Should we respond? No, Melania said. Let him own it. By week's end, Sophia's tutor had transformed her kitchen into a math carnival. Construction paper pizzas covered the floor, each slice labeled with fractions. Look, Daddy! Sophia shouted, waving a pepperoni-covered eighth. I'm a math queen. Hector's throat tightened. He'd never seen her so proud. That night, he texted Barron, "Tutor's good. Thanks." The reply came instantly, "Cool. Wanna meet her?" Hector's stomach dropped. Meet who? Sophia? Before he could refuse, another text popped up, "Not a big deal. Your call." He stared at the screen. What's the angle here? But Sophia, eavesdropping, gasped. Is that your friend? The nice boy? He's not. Can I meet him? Please? Barron arrived at the park wearing a baseball cap and a grimace. Hector had insisted on a neutral, public place, so here they were. A dusty playground flanked by reporters, kept at bay by Melania's security, and curious moms pretending not to stare. Sophia spotted Barron first. You're tall, she declared. Barron blinked. You're sparkly. He pointed at her sequin sneakers. Duh. They're magic. She twirled, then froze. Are you really a prince? Barron snorted. Do I look like one? Sophia squinted. Kinda. But your hat's ugly. Hector tensed, but Barron laughed, a real, unguarded sound. Yeah, my mom picked it. Melania, watching from a parked SUV, smirked. Sophia dragged Barron to the swings, chattering nonstop. Leah says you're rich. Are you gonna build a castle? Nah. Castles are drafty. Do you have a dog? No. Why not? Barron paused, pushing her swing. Dogs don't care if you're rich. They just, like you. Sophia nodded sagely. I want a dog. Daddy says maybe someday. Hector looked away, guilt gnawing his ribs. The meetup, predictably, leaked. Paparazzi photos splashed across tabloids, Barron pushing Sophia on a swing, her laughter frozen midair. The caption, Trump heir plays Big Brother TO security guard's kid. Comments exploded. This is so staged. Nah, look at her smile, that's real. Since when does Barron Trump smile? Melania's phone rang. Her husband's voice boomed through the speaker. What's this about Barron babysitting some guard's brat? He's making friends, Melania said coolly. Friends? That's our enemy. The guy humiliated him. And Barron forgave him. A beat of silence. Since when do we forgive enemies? Melania watched Barron through the window, now crouched in the dirt drawing fractions with Sophia. Since we realized it's the only way to win. The next morning, Melania arrived at the airport unannounced. Terminal staff scrambled as she strolled through security, no fanfare, no press. The manager trailed her, stammering, "Ma'am, we've implemented new protocols." "Show me," she interrupted. He did. New training modules, revised VIP checks, sensitivity workshops. Melania nodded, then handed him a flash drive. Add these. The files contain de-escalation techniques used by the Secret Service. Teach your staff, she said. Not just for VIPs. For everyone. The manager gaped. Why? Melania's gaze swept the terminal, the tired parents, the anxious travelers, the staff counting minutes till their shift ended. Because dignity, she said, shouldn't be a luxury. As she left, a young baggage handler snapped a covert photo. It hit Reddit with the title, "Melania Trump low-key fixing the airport that screwed her son. Respect." The post went platinum. The media storm reached hurricane force. News vans camped outside Hector's apartment, reporters shouting questions about his relationship with the Trumps. Late-night shows spliced footage of Barron pushing Sophia on swings with clips of his father's fiery rallies. The apple fell somewhere, one host quipped. Memes morphed into think pieces. Is Barron Trump the first empathetic Gen Z Republican? Barron stopped checking social media. Instead, he buried himself in SAT prep and weekend visits to the park with Sophia. Her unfiltered curiosity became an anchor. "Why do people hate you?" she asked once, mid-swing. "They don't hate me," he said, pushing her higher. "They hate what I represent." "What's represent mean?" "Like, a logo. I'm a McDonald's sign for politics." She giggled. "You're a cheeseburger?" "Shut up," he said, grinning. Hector, meanwhile, navigated a minefield. His suspension ended, but co-workers side-eyed him. "You're the guy who got famous for screwing up," a baggage handler sneered. At home, Sophia's tutoring thrived, but the bills piled up. When a lawyer called offering to sue the airport for emotional distress, Hector hung up. "We're not extortionists," he told Sophia. But the airport's lawyers weren't so principled. Facing lawsuits from passengers claiming trauma from the viral incident, they scapegoated Hector. "We'll settle if you admit negligence," they offered plaintiffs. Hector's name trended again, this time as a hashtag #FireHector. Melania watched it all from her office, a stack of legal briefs on her desk. Her chief of staff urged caution. Getting involved could backfire. Let the system work. The system isn't working, Melania said, standing. Schedule a press conference. For what? For the truth. The presser blindsided everyone. No teleprompters, no podium, just Melania in a stark white pantsuit, facing a sea of cameras. "My son was mistreated," she began, voice cool. "But this isn't about one boy. It's about how we treat every child. Every traveler. Every person who feels small." Reporters leaned forward. "The airport's failures," she continued, "are not one man's fault. They are a symptom of systems that value efficiency over empathy. So today, we're announcing a partnership to retrain staff, not just here, but nationwide." A slide flashed behind her, Dignity over Protocol, a training program co-developed with trauma experts. "Mrs. Trump," a reporter shouted. "Is this a bid to rehab your family's image?" Melania's gaze sharpened. "This is a bid to prevent your child from being the next viral hashtag." The room buzzed. Barron watched the presser from his dorm-style bedroom at the Trump residence. When Melania returned, he met her at the door. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," she said, slipping off her heels, "I did." "Why?" She paused. "Because someone once told me, be best." "I'm trying." Barron smirked. Cheesy. But true. At the airport, changes unfolded quietly. Staff attended workshops on de-escalation. Managers rotated shifts to curb burnout. Hector, reinstated but demoted, found himself in a training session led by a former hostage negotiator. "Empathy isn't weakness," the instructor said. "It's the ultimate control." During a role-play exercise, Hector froze when handed a scenario mirroring his encounter with Barron. His partner, a young TSA agent, whispered, "Dude, you okay?" Hector shook his head, walked out, and vomited in a trash can. Barron's redemption arc hit a snag that weekend. At the park, a blogger live-streamed him and Sophia building a stick fort. "Look who's virtue signaling," the caption jeered. Trolls dissected every frame, "He's faking kindness for clout." Sophia, oblivious, crowned Barron king of mud. He played along, but that night, he texted Hector, "This isn't working." Hector replied, "It is for her." Attached was a photo of Sophia's latest math test, a B+ circled in glitter. Melania's reforms faced backlash. A conservative pundit ranted, "Since when do we coddle trespassers?" A liberal critic countered, "Since when do Trumps care about workers?" But quietly, other airports adopted the training. A Chicago screener de-escalated a panic attack, a Dallas agent reunited a lost child without handcuffs. The victories were small, unnewsworthy, and everywhere. On the eve of Hector's sensitivity training exam, he found a note in his locker. "Quit. You don't belong here." He crumpled it, then spotted Barron leaning against a baggage cart, disguised in a hoodie. "What are you doing here?" Hector hissed. "Sneaking in," Barron said. "Cool cameras, by the way." "You'll get me fired, again." Barron shrugged. "I'm here to say sorry." Hector blinked. "For what?" "For making your life harder. The tutoring, the park. I thought I was helping, but," he kicked a pebble. "I didn't ask what you needed." Hector stared. In the boy's face, he saw Sophia's hope, his own failures, and a glint of something he couldn't name, maturity, maybe. "What I need," Hector said slowly, "is to pass this damn test tomorrow." Barron grinned. "Let's cram." They huddled in a break room. Barron quizzed him with flashcards. "What's the first step in de-escalation?" "Listen," Hector said. "And if they're lying?" "Assume they're scared, not malicious." "Whoa. You've been studying." Hector smiled faintly. "Had a good teacher." When the shift manager barged in, Barron ducked under the table. "Rivera. Why's there a teenager in?" "Tutor," Hector said. The manager squinted. "That kid looks like." "A tutor," Hector repeated firmly. The manager left, muttering about HR. Barron crawled out, stifling laughter. For a moment, the weight lifted. 6 months later, the airport buzzed with its usual chaos, but the air felt lighter. Hector straightened his tie. Now emblazoned with a new pin, dignity over protocol. At his post, he watched a frazzled teenager argue with a check-in agent. The boy's voice rose, cracking with frustration. Hector approached, hands raised, palms out, a gesture he'd practiced until it felt natural. "Hey," he said gently, "let's take a breath, yeah? Tell me what's up." The boy glared. "They say my ticket's invalid." Hector nodded. "That's rough. Mind if I take a look?" As the boy huffed, Hector remembered Barron's advice during their cram session, listen like they're the only person in the room. It worked. Minutes later, the boy was rebooked, his scowl softened by a muttered, "Thanks, man." Across the terminal, Barron Trump strode through security, his face half hidden under a baseball cap. The same officer who'd once mocked him scanned his boarding pass. Their eyes met. "Name?" the officer asked, tone flat. "Barron Trump." The man paused, then chuckled. "Welcome back, Mr. Trump." He handed back the pass. "Safe flight. No cameras, no sneers. Just civility." Barron nodded, surprised by how little the moment stirred him. The victory felt small, personal, not a headline. Melania watched from a discreet distance, her presence unnoticed. She'd come to observe the program's impact incognito, dressed in a simple trench coat. A young mother nearby struggled with a stroller and a screaming toddler. Before Melania could react, a staffer swooped in. "Let me help," the woman said, guiding the stroller smoothly. "Thank you," the mother breathed. "Our pleasure," the staffer replied, words Melania herself had scripted into the training. Privilege, she'd learned, wasn't just wealth. It was the power to reshape systems so kindness became routine. Hector's shift ended with a text from Sophia, "Dad. Leah says I'm ready for 4th grade math." He smiled, then spotted Barron lingering near the gates. "Cutting it close?" Hector called. Barron shrugged. "Flight's delayed. Figured I'd say bye." They stood awkwardly, the echoes of their first meeting hanging between them. Finally, Barron said, "You kept the pin. You kept the hat." Barron smirked. "Mom's choice." A voice announced boarding. Barron turned to leave, but Hector stopped him. "Wait." He pulled a folded drawing from his pocket, Sophia's stick-figure rendition of Barron as a math king, Crown Askew. "She made this." Barron studied it, then tucked it carefully into his bag. "Tell her I'll get a dog." "Maybe." Hector laughed. "She'll hold you to that." As Barron's plane climbed through the clouds, Hector headed home. His apartment was still cramped, his budget tight, but Sophia's laughter now outweighed the struggles. She'd hung a world map on the wall, dotted with places she dreamed of visiting. Someday, she'd say, tracing the lines. Someday. The word no longer felt like a taunt. Melania's car pulled away from the airport as dusk fell. On the radio, a talk show debated her program's success. "Say what you will about the Trumps," a caller argued, "but my sister's a TSA agent. She says the job feels human now." Melania turned the dial off. Some truths didn't need amplification. Epilogue. A year later, a viral photo surfaced, not of conflict, but of a tall teenager and a giggling girl flying a kite on a windswept hill. The caption read, "Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear ugly hats." No names. No politics. Just a moment, simple and unguarded. But those who knew, knew. Voiceover, closing. Strength isn't in never falling. It's in choosing who to help up, and who to forgive, when you do. The screen faded to black. The end.